like with the sisters, maybe you didn't realize the property was, the size, and then all of a sudden, oh, wait. It's still okay and appropriate to do it as soon as you recognize it, is that correct?
Sure, yeah, I mean, you don't want to,
You don't want to be wrong.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure,
Yeah.
because it's like, you may not know on those past that time.
sure, right.
Okay. There's nothing else, we're gonna move right along. 2, discussion items, ordinance review. Repeal and amend park ordinances to address homelessness. Back to you, Ross.
Yes. All right, so you have materials in your packet that are a draft ordinance following up on a work session that we had where I went through a slide presentation on homelessness and the case law that we're confronted with, and also with the statutes that are being updated or have been updated that take effect July 1st of this year. And after that discussion, my takeaway from you all was to do three things. To address the Boise case specifically, because Cresswell has a camping regulation that is almost word for word the Boise regulation. So we wanted to address that. Number 2, we wanted to select a site in the city where camping was lawful, because we're forced to do that. We're forced to look at our public properties and identify somewhere where folks can sleep overnight or camp. And that spot was Garden Lake Park. And so I addressed that. And number 3, we wanted to address vehicle camping and address that by allowing vehicle camping in certain areas of town for up to 72 hours. And then after 72 hours, they would have to move to a new block. I forget what I said in this draft. How far? I think I said 2 blocks down.
2 blocks.
Yeah, 2 blocks. So those were my 3 takeaways. And so the ordinance in front of you is intended to accomplish those 3 takeaways. And before the ordinance is the track changes version of the code. I didn't know if that would be helpful or not. So the ordinance itself is just the wording. The final wording is how it would look in the code. And those provisions up front are the tracked changes versions of the code. So it shows you the deletions and additions.
I found that very helpful.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So am I reading it correctly that camping would be allowed in Garden Lake Park, but not vehicle parking overnight? No vehicle parking overnight?
Right, yes. And that was a suggestion of staff in terms of their ability to enforce and work within the parks. They thought it was better to allow vehicle parking on certain streets in the right-of-way, but not in our parking lots.
Okay, so an RV parked overnight in Garden Lake Park would not be allowed?
Correct.
Okay, and if someone is sleeping in an RV at night in Garden Lake Park, then our sheriff's deputies, where would they tell those folks to move?
To one of the rights of way where it's allowed.
Okay, so it's still within Cresswell, so
Yeah.
we're,
We wouldn't be able to say, why don't you go outside of town? Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. And will you be doing that training with our Lane County, the deputies that we contract with, or how will they get that communication?
They will certainly see the ordinance, and Michelle will certainly work with them on that. And if they have questions, they're absolutely able to talk with me about it. They're pretty smart guys, so.
I'm concerned about litigious people, if that's the right
Sure.
word.
Yeah, it is the right word.
That will just come here and then try to,
Yep.
sue us.
The
So,
whole state's gonna be like that.
The training, I have complete faith in staff, but I just wanted to know if you were gonna be involved in that, or.
I certainly can be.
So we're gonna hold all questions right now to just the council until a later time. And then we'll have questions from the public. Okay?
What, a separate public hearing or?
No, it's not a public hearing, but I want to make sure the council has time just to interact with Ross, and then before we quit on this subject tonight, we'll open it up to any members from the public who have questions. or
And
input.
will you ask questions of Ross, or would he leave and?
No. When the council's had time to interact with Ross, then we'll open up to the public, and you can interact with council, interact with Ross. We just want to hold that till we get there, okay? So we're trying to ask questions, get clarification on the ordinance, that kind of thing at this point. So Tammy, you had the floor.
I wish there was an alternative, but there's not, and you answered my questions. Thank you.
And, you know, I'll just dovetail on that. This is where we are today, at this minute maybe even. As new case law comes out, especially after July 1st, when we start to see cases that come out on the statute, things will likely change. And so I may be back on fine tuning, but I believe what we have in front of us is okay under the current law.
On page 3 of the, not of the edited version, but of the final version, I don't know what page that is in our packets. Actually, maybe-
49.
Yeah, thank you. So I find under F, that last sentence, it says, a person may use a vehicle or recreational vehicle for shelter or sleeping on public rights of way only under the following circumstances, right? But then read number 2. I find that does not flow. Like, it says only under these circumstances is this allowed, but then it goes on and starts listing things that aren't allowed. It's just confusing to me, and I'm wondering if we couldn't work on that wording a little bit.
Okay.
Where was that at again?
It's page 3.
Yeah.
It's
F2.
section F.
F.
If it's reading the last sentence in section F and then moving into number 2. And it's not just number 2, but number 2 is the first example of that. It just, either I'm reading it wrong or it I don't know.
I mean, I think that is similar to number 3. And maybe
Right.
Number 6.
It's the transition.
Right.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I do.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a question, Ross, on section 1C, the violation. Up $200. I think I must have been misunderstood previously, that the Boise law said that a person cannot be fined for camping in a public place. But here it spells out a fine of $200.
Right, but we're allowed to have reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on camping. And so what we have here is, we have someone who is allowed to sleep at Garden Lake Park, and they will not, it's allowed, so there's no fine there. And so is there somewhere in the city where someone can sleep and not be fined? Yes, there is.
They can sleep there, but they can't park the car there?
Correct.
Right,
Okay.
So if they're in a car or an RV, and the sheriff comes along and says, you can't sleep in this vehicle overnight, you have to move it to
to the street.
a street, and there's only certain streets allowed, because this also limits streets adjacent to residential areas, and the person says, I'm out of gas, I can't move it tonight. Or, I'm in bed sleeping, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm not gonna move it. Then they can be fined $200,
Correct.
because they failed to
To
move
comply.
that night.
Yeah, because there is a lawful place for them to sleep.
Or if a person throws out a sleeping bag on a sidewalk in Crestwell, and the sheriff comes along and says, you can't sleep here overnight, you have to go out to Garden Lake Park. And the person says, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm asleep. Or, I can't walk that far. Or, it's raining. Then they can be fined because they didn't move with their tent out to Garden Lake Park.
Correct.
Okay. So that, a $200 fine is legal in those situations?
Correct.
Okay. So, another question, and council members, just raise your hand or jump in. Under section 2, hours. Specifically, it refers to minors. Unaccompanied minors are permitted between the hours of 7 and 9, May 1st to September, and hours of 7 a.m. to 7, October 1st. Notwithstanding the above, Garden Lake Park is not subject to closure hours set out in this subsection. So does that mean that minors can be in or sleep in Garden Lake Park because the rule of curfew doesn't apply to them because it's Garden Lake Park? That was a little confusing to me, the carry-on of, I mean, essentially we have a curfew in our parks if you're underage, certain times. Does that mean, however, that Garden Lake Park has no hours of closure, which it states, 24/7, Garden Lake Park? So if you're a minor, you can be at Garden Lake Park anytime. Or does it mean if you're an unaccompanied minor, the rule still applies to you?
Well, so that is, you're clever, Mayor. So that is an issue that is unknown, and we will probably see maybe some litigation on that, of whether an unaccompanied minor is subject to Boise. Because there's an argument that an unaccompanied minor is not allowed to be homeless. That an unaccompanied minor has resources in terms of DHS and Lane County services, where an officer would pick that minor up and take them to Child Protective Services or other DHS services rather than an arrest. And so there's a question about whether an unaccompanied minor is even subject to Boise. And so that's why we don't change the curfews, but we do provide that notwithstanding. So say the minor is with their, maybe it's a family unit, is sleeping. They would all be allowed to sleep together.
They're not unaccompanied at that point.
Right. Right.
It's supervised minors, right? In section 2, for adults and supervised minors,
Right.
unless otherwise posted.
Right.
Yeah, but then the next sentence,
Supervised versus unaccompanied.
But you also have, you also have a curfew provision in your code that refers to unaccompanied minors. And so we haven't made any changes to that.
So then I had a question under section 3. Motor vehicle parking in city parks. It was recently pointed out to me that over at Garden Lake, over at Holt Park, there's cars that are parked in parking spaces all the time. And it appears they belong to people who live across the street, who park their vehicles there because there's not really street parking. There's a bicycle lane in front of those houses, then there's the city park parking. So unless they park in their driveway, there's not street parking available. I mean, am I correct that there are people who park there and use it for their personal residence? Unless it's posted otherwise, then that's prohibited parking. Is that correct?
I imagine it's prohibited right now. I don't know for sure. It sounds like maybe an enforcement issue. I don't know.
Not that I'm wanting to make it an enforcement issue particularly. I just was reading this over thinking that's what we're talking about. So
Right.
that's not really a change of our current code probably.
I don't believe so.
Okay, I just wanted clarification.
Yes, I think that is right.
Well, then there's the one, use of power generators, page 4, because that's been an issue in Crestwell. So now we're saying that if you have a power generator, you're parked along the road in a spot where you can park, but you have a power generator that you're required to keep yourself alive at night. But now we're saying that that is not permissible,
It's always been not permissible
but we just haven't enforced it.
out of compassion for the individual.
So what do we do now? Nothing different?
It's the same ordinance.
I think we have to be consistent in whether or not we're applying our rules and laws. I hate saying that because I understand that everybody's situations are different, but I don't think that, I think when we talk about perception, we're getting to a perception where we're picking and choosing who has to be lawful and who doesn't. And I think that if people are breaking that rule, we should be fining them. If we're gonna tell people they can't have, their basketballs out, then we have to be, it just it has to be one or the other. It can't be a little bit here, a little bit here. For this guy, yeah, but for this guy, no, that's.
This is a gray area though, Counselor, because this isn't a basketball, it's a health issue. And so if they're a disabled person and they need the generator to run this health device, maybe it's a question for Ross, if Michelle directs the sheriff deputies to shut it down and this person has a health incident because of it, then that is
Reliable.
that's exactly where I'm going. I mean,
Which-
out of
which
compassion,
is a good point,
our deputies
right.
have not shut that down.
Well, so tied into this real quick, it says the vehicle is not located adjacent to a residentially zoned private property. We have noise regulations. Are those noise regulations throughout the city or in residential zoned areas? Because if they're parking in a business area, then the noise regulation still applies even though they're in a business area where there's nobody there overnight.
Right.
Okay.
So I think it's an enforcement issue. I think having a no generator provision is a reasonable time, place, and manner regulation. And so applied across the board, I think it is reasonable under the law until we have a judge say otherwise. If that results in the death of a person, I think we would say we're applying our law evenly and even-handedly across the board. But I do recognize as well that your deputies have some what we call prosecutorial discretion. And they are good at using it, and they are professional, and I think they do a good job. And so I think this is one of those areas where a deputy uses some sound judgment and tries to find some services for this person, tries to find them a quieter generator, starts a Kickstarter campaign, whatever it might be, to find a community solution. And I think if you're a judge, your municipal court judge is very good at finding community solutions to these types of problems. And I think your deputies are good as well. So I think the legal standard, the law is good. I think it's acceptable. In the individual application of that law is where we empower our deputies to make sound decisions.
Do we have a limitation on the camping in Garden Lake Park, the overnight camping, how many nights they can stay?
We do not. And I think likely, if that's your one place to sleep, then a member of the Crestwell community who happens to be homeless will be a resident of Garden Lake Park. I think that's the policy decision.
It's really hard for me to get behind this. I know we have to do something by July because
Yeah,
of
we're
the
being
state
forced.
law, but it's with the neighbors and people that walk there, and I mean, it's just,
You're taking a park away from the public.
it's really hard.
Well, the Ninth Circuit Court, right, they made the decision that we have to allow them.
We have to give them an option of where they can go.
Michelle.
Well, I thought this might come up tonight.
I
So
was
this
gonna
is
ask
a
if you had the
map.
map. You
Yeah,
had
we're
it sitting there that
prepared.
whole time.
Did you have this when I was in Pennsylvania at the last work?
No, this is the first time city council sees this map. The green spots are city property.
I mean, the last work session that I was
Okay.
part of, we were asking Cliff, we put him on the spot. Is there any dead-end streets that we can send tent
That's where
campers?
Garden Park is over there, right?
Garden Lake
I'm just
Park.
trying to, okay,
There's not.
Yeah.
okay.
Not, I mean, Butte, that's county.
This is a water treatment facility, correct?
You're right, that's outside of our UGB,
It has to be.
so it has to be inside the UGB. Or else that
Which is
lovely
this
place.
here, right?
Right.
Yes.
uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the airport's outside the UGB too?
No, the airport's inside the UGB.
Okay, but this big field is outside.
That's right.
Doesn't want to
Well, the
say
airport commissioner's left. Maybe we
Yeah.
Hangar number 9.
I'm right here.
end of it on Let's tell McDonald's if they really want to build by TJ's, they gotta give a strip of
Little quick
dead-end
road
road
going
for
on. Yeah,
camping.
What about the new Filbert Orchard north of the airport off of Dale Cody?
That's not
It's
within
not
our UGB.
Our UGB,
Oh.
and the new state law says it has to be within the city, or we can't move them.
Well, and
Well, the unfortunate
What-
part is
what's
I know
this
everyone's
green right here?
brainstorming, we all care and we all want to be
Oh,
compassionate.
yeah.
I know the pain of
That's Second
compassion. I've had
Street
a
Park.
family member be homeless
Oh.
before. But the reality of it is, especially with no limitations and no laws
They're
and no
all coming
consistency,
here.
not only are they all coming here, but they're all going to be there for good, because this is just gonna be one happy commune and everybody move in, and then the neighbors or anyone who
Well-
wants to use the park or who
there's
is
already
close to
people,
it.
there's
It's a
already
crime
homeless
problem.
people recruiting other homeless
We
people
have
from out
crime
of state to
problems
come
in
right now.
our neighborhood, and
Because of
it's
the free
not a-
money that the state's gonna start giving.
Yeah, and they're
Yeah.
gonna hand it out and say, oh, go there, but it's not that it's
Doesn't solve our
not in my
problem, but-
backyard, it's what's a nice
The
compromise.
thing is, we don't have
don't have
services
services in
here.
our state.
We don't have
We don't
anything
have
here.
health, we
we're
don't
not
have any
allowed to
free
tell them
health
to
care
go to
providers.
Shelter.
Yes, our deputies can do that.
They can?
They can
try
say,
to get
it- oh, if you need health care, it's
Oh,
here,
okay.
if you,
They can
you
and
know.
they have.
They can, but they're limited, like, they can't send them to.
They can't tell them
they
to
can't
take
send them
their
to a
tent down.
church. I read that, right?
We can't tell them
They
where to
can't
go outside.
force them to go to church, but they can certainly
They
give them
can
a list
tell
of
them there's
churches.
a
They
free
can.
meal at
Okay.
the Baptist church, they can.
But they
Okay.
can't say you have to.
You
go
have to go to a church, right, okay, but they can, I thought they
Right,
could even,
it's-
They can offer.
The
okay,
reasonableness
that's good. 'Cause
evaluation, the analysis is based
those are the
upon-
kindest ones
It just
usually
feels like
anyway.
encouragement
properties.
more than
Yeah.
temporary help.
Yeah, but we have to be in here, I
And
guess,
it's everywhere.
It's
so.
gotta be
This is
What is
how
this
it's
right here?
reasonable.
That's part of our sewer treatment plant.
Oh, so that's not even,
Park is full.
like, empty
They
property.
could
Well,
go
it
hang
is,
out
it
now.
is
That's
empty
Second Street
property.
Park, right?
Now,
That's the
Yeah,
new one
that's
in
a-
the street, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Are any of these parks less used than the others?
Oh, I see what that is, that's behind the daycare.
While I was researching.
Well,
all
Garden
this,
Lake Park
I read this
has
about the
the most
2021
open
Oregon
space.
legislature.
I'm going to the
The
bathroom.
other ones have playgrounds and
Way to
places
pass
for
this
There's no
children.
concern about
Take
it being
into
your
account
waterway or
the
anything like that?
Of all stakeholders,
There's already
including
issues,
people experiencing
because I
homelessness.
live right over here.
We try to make a decision,
With the
and we
crime
haven't
going
asked
up,
any of the
and they
homeless
come
in
through
town
our
what they thought.
neighborhood. This is
How is
happened
that
this
taking
weekend. They
into
case
account
our neighborhood,
their
they go into
perspective?
our backyards and
I know,
take stuff.
at our
And off
research
our
for
front
mayor,
porch and take stuff.
Medford even put two
And
homeless on
and the
their
amount of
council
trash and
to
stuff
get
that
it,
happens in
you know,
there
figure out
already,
what they want.
and
So do we need
issues
to
that
do
have
that?
happened already, and
I- no,
campfires
I don't
already.
believe so. I don't
This
believe
is
that's
without
what
even
we're
it being
Yeah.
sanctioned.
So if
Until July
Oregon
1st.
said that.
I feel advertising
said that.
that.
Well, and I can appreciate, you're right, you're not advertising, but here's the thing
But like,
too.
how come we
So,
have not heard
I don't know
anything
what you
about
mean.
it, like?
The legislature said.
At
The
all.
We've been
legislature
talking
said
about
by
it.
statute.
Yeah.
Nobody
It's
living
all-
on that
it's not
side,
Oh, so
and we're
there's
gonna
no
be
s-
most
they just
directly
said it, but they
affected,
didn't
because there's a little
pass a
footbridge that
statute
goes
that
over.
said
What are we gonna do,
reasonableness.
put a gate
Okay.
there?
But you,
I found that some cities.
but you're
have-
also
From
taking
coming
fairly
in,
near
blowing
into
into
our
our
all
neighborhood.
citizens,
Good
'cause I don't
idea,
even feel
but
safe
it's
right
not
now taking my
required.
Yeah,
mom
this
there in
state-
her
this
walker
state
dogs
laws
down
is-
to the little lake.
It's
not-
I mean, I understand you're in a rocket top hard place, but it just sort of feels like we should be in one of
Yes,
those big old public hearing about that
Some
for
cities
anybody
are-
who lives adjacent
It's a
to
hard
this,
decision.
to Garden Lake, which is,
Oh,
you know, we have
They're
146.
living
Well, we are gonna have a.
No,
they're not
we
permitted to
have
have
fires.
fires.
It
Public
doesn't
hearing
matter
for
what's
this
permitted,
ordinance change.
that's the
July
problem, they're not
1st,
permitted to
so
live
where
in
it's
the
gonna be
village
I
on
think it's,
Haydale.
I think it's
Right
on the
before
docket
Sears
for.
Park either. They're down there
That's
all the
probably why
time, they
they
got
said
tents
that
all
June
over
is
the
gonna
woods
have
down there,
so
they're
many
firing
public
guns.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
I
permitted
know, I
doesn't
don't know that for
matter.
sure. I'm just
but they
saying.
can,
Okay, I'm gonna rein
So
this
thank you for
in.
bringing this map, it's very helpful.
So,
That also makes me sad.
we need to talk for a minute about timeline for this. Because July 1st is the deadline. This is an ordinance, which means if it doesn't pass unanimously, it goes to a second vote. And for us to meet the timeline, we have to take the first vote on this in 2 weeks.
And you probably won't meet the deadline if it's not unanimous, because it will not be 30 days.
It would be
July
voted on-
1st.
It would be voted on in May, then it would be voted a second date
In
in
June.
June.
What is it?
And so it would be potentially
A little
2 weeks.
rushed.
It'd be potentially 2 weeks.
We have no choice.
It
though.
would be,
We
it would be
can get our
adopted
hands sued off.
in June, but it wouldn't go into effect till July, so we missed
Unless
the
we
deadline.
did a emergency. We could do an emergency ordinance.
That goes into effect immediately upon adoption.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would prefer, I generally prefer not to do an emergency ordinance,
Yeah.
because I think timing is not, creating your own emergency is not a very good justification for declaring an emergency. I also, I don't want to let you off the hook, but I also, I think if we are in the adoption process, I'm not, July 1st can come and go, and I think the sky won't fall on Crestwell as long as we are making progress and in the deliberation process about coming into compliance. The statute does say that someone can sue the city, but it also says if they want attorney's fees, then they need to give the city notice. And I think these cases are going to be about attorney's fees, because that's how they're going to get brought, because people aren't going to want to have to pay for their own attorney to bring a case like this. And so I think we have a little bit of wiggle room. Again, I'm not trying to let you off the hook. I think we do need to be deliberative and keep moving this forward. But I'm not so wedded about July 1st, as long as it's in our sights. If this happens mid-July, if it's effective in August, I would be okay.
Cliff?
I have a question for Ross. So, we require car camping to move 2 blocks every 72 hours. Can that same restriction be put on tent camping at Garden Lake Park? And the reason that move is to keep them cycling, so they keep their camps clean, they have to pick up after themselves. We can't kick them out, but can we make them move 200 feet every 72 hours, so they have to pick up their camp, tote it somewhere, clean up their trash, and reset up?
Great question, Cliff.
Very great
And the
question.
answer is, I don't know. I think, if I recall correctly, City of Bend has something sort of similar to that. And they may be the test case to see whether it's reasonable. You're asking me whether that is a reasonable time, place, and manner regulation. And I think there's an argument that yes, and the argument for it is exactly the rationale that you set out, is because it's our park, other people use it, and if someone stays in the same place, then it turns into an unhealthy environment, not only for them, the campers, but for everyone else around them. So there is a rationale for that, and I mean, it's a very solid rationale, and a rationale that someone can make to a judge, but at the end of the day, it's the judge who decides whether that's actually reasonable in the face of all the other factors, and so I'm sorry, I just don't know.
I like that idea because we have an obligation to keep our parks clean for the tax-paying citizens that paid for them to use them, right? And so I like that idea. Is it something that we can?
We can draft, I can actually, yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I don't want to be the one
No,
making that decision,
I know
but
you're-
but I'm
Yeah.
just saying, can we consider that?
I think it would be a policy
Yeah.
choice of this body to say we're willing to take that risk. And unfortunately, I really can't evaluate that risk very well for you because so much of this is unknown. But I think there is there is a rational basis for making that policy choice.
Well, and isn't there like horseshoe pits and stuff out there? I mean, that's supposed to be a park where families can go and play, and if there's garbage and needles laying around, that's not gonna be that way.
Yeah.
And so, if, you know, everybody agreed, I would love to consider changing that to what Cliff suggests.
I just wondered if that's consistent with car camping within the ordinance. It's still a consistency that we require moving within 72 hours.
Yeah,
Keep it consistent.
so I think you make a great case, Cliff. I think the counterpoint is a car is different. A car has wheels, it's self-contained, it's supposed to be self-contained, and it takes 30 seconds to move 200 feet, whereas someone who's got their whole world in a tent, it takes them all day to adjust. So, I mean, I don't know how that plays out.
It just gives us the opportunity to clean up.
I totally can get it.
Without having to deal with
I do.
folks being in a campsite.
Yeah, I get it.
Building makeshift structures and.
Stacy, do you have anything else there? So, tying in with that, in the whereas part of page 1, it mentions in the third whereas down, people living in makeshift camps in the right-of-way, local parks or vehicles often lack access to safe and sanitary restrooms and trash receptacles, resulting in unsanitary condition. And then the two whereases later, it says that the city has a responsibility to promote safe environment, limit unsanitary conditions, allocate public resources effectively, meet legal and humanitarian standards. So with all that in mind, I would think that maybe that 72-hour thing of moving the tent ties in with this. That we could ask you to put that in there, and you're saying you don't know, and it may be tested at Bend. And so as a council, we could say, we think we need to put it in there, even if it does get tested. So, okay, so we're gonna open up now for input from members of the public. Lori?
Gosh, I just think this is a lot. I think this is complicated. I think we're gonna have all kinds of issues because we already have issues with Garden Lake. I live, like you cross the footbridge and you're in my neighborhood and we own that property. We have open common area. And we already have people coming over stealing stuff from our neighborhood already. And this is without, you know, this being a sanctioned site. So, you know, and they're under the impression that our property is part of Garden Lake because it's park-like. So they just come on over. So we're gonna have issues with them coming over thinking they can camp over there. And, you know, and I know the sheriff's department has already short-staffed and there's nobody on at night. So, you know, and then the Cliff suggestion, how the heck, you know, is that gonna get policed? Because there'd have to be somebody keeping track of when someone checked in, you know, name and wherever, and then making sure they're gonna move. I think that'd be really difficult with people that are just camping, because it's already hard enough, because we've had them parking cars and RVs in our neighborhood, in residential areas, and it's difficult to get them out. But I'm just kind of flabbergasted. It makes me, like, none of us know about that, of this eventuality, and it's kind of, you know, yes, we're compassionate and understanding, but it makes it, you know, makes us want to put a gate right there and say, okay, you can't come into our neighborhood anymore. We're just going to put a gate right there at that footbridge.
Like many issues,
You
a
know?
lot of these things are not widely known to the public.
But it's
Going to be
just,
soon, this is happening to every.
yeah, and
single
so
one.
if Garden Lake is the place and you have no place else to put it, you know, because I've seen this happen when they had Occupy in Eugene and it was under the Washington Jefferson Bridge, and now they've got it all cordoned off because it destroyed the whole area, and now it's got to recover. That could happen at Garden Lake, but if you know they're coming and it's gonna happen, then you might want to designate a specific area for that camping and say, this is the spot, this is where you can camp, so they aren't all along the trail, you know, and so as people are walking along, they're not being freaked out, or people are coming to fish and they're stumbling on someone's camp, you know, and they already make campfires over there. They already do.
And it's not police.
Yeah, so if they're coming, you better figure out a specific area for them to be. Like, say, this is the spot. You know, within this zone, you can do your little camping, and that way you could police them a little better. And they'd be maybe closer to the bathrooms and the trash receptacles, because you don't have enough trash receptacles or probably bathrooms if you're gonna have camping, prolonged camping there, you know, so
There's
you gotta
not gonna
figure
be-
out how to control it a little, because if you just let them camp wherever, then nobody's gonna wanna come, you know, to use the frisbee golf or even walk their dogs or fish
It's
or anything.
inevitable. They're gonna spread out and they're not gonna follow rules because that's just the general way. It's not judgmental, it's just a general way that they function. I mean, they are down by Cloverdale and in the backwoods along the river and near Sears Road. There's homeless tents down there. They're firing guns at different times. They come through the neighborhoods and they check door handles and they steal little petty things. It's gonna be worse when you have them all in a concentrated area and they're not gonna have any, it's gonna be a growth and a shortening, a growth and a shortening. Every time different groups come in, they're gonna expand a little bit more out into the neighborhood. They can rush back into the camps. No one's gonna do anything. And the police, they're already overwhelmed.
And they basically tell us, like, when I have had to call them, and it's been me, because I'm the one who gets the call, because I'm the president over there. And usually they'll say, well, we're sorry, we can't come, you know, and I might get someone 2 or 3 days down the road after it's already happened. You know, and just today I had a sheriff's department come asking for my video camera because guys on camera coming, checking our gates, our side gates, coming into our backyards at 4 a.m. in the morning already, and this is before this sanctioned site, you know, so it's really gonna have a big impact on our neighborhood specifically. Anybody that lives on that site is gonna be impacted because, you know, they just are.
Yeah.
And I think they're gonna be shocked when they find out, because I'm gonna have to tell them that this has come down the pike, and you know, it'd be great if I could give them a copy of the ordinance and say, this is what it is, you know? And then, I don't know, we may need to put up a gate.
William, do you have any comments in the back?
Rather than just open up the whole park, can you have campsites, designated campsites in them? Like you do you go to a national park and there's campsites, and when it's full, it's full. Is
We
that,
can't turn anyone away.
You can't limit it. I
you
know.
you can't have.
No, that's why it's just an open door to everyone's gonna be coming. It's like,
Well, Even
even to
we
Oregon, let
can't
alone
make
our
stop
state.
it, you know.
if
Yeah.
you look at Eugene, all the
All those
St. Vincent
pods,
de
the
Paul,
little-
when they've
Yeah.
got little areas,
Yeah,
they're full. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, they've got shelters, they're full, you go to the next place, but there's
to a point, people will move on if they have those little domes and they have the little isolated places.
Yeah.
But the point is that come July 1st, no matter what, statewide or whatever, it's gonna open it up with less restriction and you're gonna have to take care of them. So if you're full, it doesn't matter. It's gonna be the city that has to deal with it.
Well,
Or
there's
find a
gonna
place
be
for them.
drug and alcohol.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, because there
Yeah.
are bottles everywhere already,
Yep.
you know, and needles.
Yep.
That's the one reason we had to close our parking lot and our breezeway by our bathrooms, was because of all that. So it's like, we can't even share if we wanted to because of
A
that.
couple of years ago, like I said, I tried to take my mom to that park over there, and it wasn't safe then, and there was shifty stuff going on there, it was broad daylight. So it's gonna basically be, we've given over our park
Yeah.
to the homeless and or whoever chooses to be there, whether they're Creswell citizens or not, they're now citizens of the park. It's like Ross said, it's like
Tammy?
terrible.
I don't have a crystal ball to know that there will be drugs and alcohol, and I think stating it's gonna be this way or that way is,
It's already that way.
there's
they're there.
Okay, I'm gonna ask that we not interrupt with our comments, okay?
But what we can do is try to mitigate that and try to prevent it. I am reading the Bend code that was adopted last month, and the tent camping is 24 hours in one location, and then it must be moved 600 feet, and it may not return to the prior location it moved out of for 72 hours. And the city, if they choose, may close that site they moved out of for 14 days to allow for environmental restoration or remediation of contaminants by hazardous materials or any danger that may be to human life or safety.
I thought I remembered it was Bend. So that goes part and parcel with Bend being a much larger city,
Yes.
with them having a lot more permitted or non-prohibited spaces. So
Yeah,
if
we only have one.
right, so if we are talking about a universe of one, we can't really close down that universe of one. Whereas Bend has a universe of 20, they can close down one, and the homeless can fill in the gaps in the others. So that's just part of the policy. I'm sorry, part of the policy decision about what do we do in Crestwell, and part of the problem with designating one area is that necessarily creates density and concentration. Whereas if you say anywhere in the city, then that means less density, less concentration, and you know, that's the policy choice of where to draw that line.
So it feels like we're saying two things. If you're in an RV or a car, you can go one spot. If you're not, then you have to go out to the park. So one of my questions is under page 4 here of the ordinance. Item 10 says the vehicle or recreational vehicle is not located adjacent to residentially zoned private property. So my question is, what areas do we have in town that are not residentially zoned?
The downtown area. Well, actually,
Not all of downtown.
yeah, downtown area.
Not all of it, though.
No.
Well,
It's the downtown zone is not residential, and then we have actually commercial resort, which is all of East Side.
And what about industrial?
And we have industrial areas, yes.
So they could park in the industrial over across the road. They could park out by the golf course. In commercial resort, meaning the golf course or the golf course.
We could add
Home.
commercial resort as a place that's
only if it's
excluded.
city-owned, wouldn't it be
No, they could park their vehicles in commercial resort.
Zoned. Hold on.
not on the private property, though?
No,
It would
but
have to
in the
be on the
street.
street. Right. Just wanted to clarify, it wouldn't be in the parking lot of the golf course, it would be on the street.
Right. So, I mean, that's the question I have is where are we saying? Because, for instance, we have lots of vehicles that are parking right over here in front of the Masonic Lodge. Is that not,
Let me see if I can find a zoning map.
okay.
Okay, make a quick comment about the resort.
Yeah, but I'm gonna have Cliff make a comment. Cliff?
So the downtown commercial zone is D to A, mill to fifth.
Say that again. D,
D to A, mill to fifth.
that's the downtown
That's the
commercial.
downtown commercial.
There's a lot of residential
There's a lot of residential
in this area.
Most of that area that is allowable to camp that would not be adjacent to residential is the 3 blocks right here downtown. Basically from D to C, you're not gonna be reporting out, and then B. Those areas are not adjacent to
Residential.
They're downtown.
So we have just about 3 blocks worth.
Residential is yellow on this map.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Yes, you have a comment?
I'm intimate with the resort commercial overlay because I live in it. It includes Emerald Valley West Homeowners Association, it includes the Emerald Valley Golf Course, and it includes the villas, and that's it. We pay the highest tax rate in the state of Oregon because we're in a resort. So it's residential too. It's primarily residential with the exception of the golf course. That's the only, everything else is residential.
I think that's
So
why,
don't just
I
like-
think that's why she suggested that we could add that as one of the places they can't go.
Well,
Yeah.
oh, I was hearing just the opposite.
No, that's what she just said a couple minutes ago, yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. The yellow is residential, so right now as the ordinance is written, the yellow areas, they could not park.
They could park all around the school?
Those are that's public zone, public use.
Okay, so that would be off limits. Does it need to be in the ordinance?
No, well, I think you need to think about what zones you want.
You need to maybe specifically say not near schools
Yeah.
or, yeah.
Could you define your terminology of the resort? What were you saying about the
Residential.
The commercial resort is the peachy color.
And they can park anywhere there, you said? Or
Right
they
now, as the ordinance is written, they can.
can't? It's heavily residential though.
Heavily residential.
That's what we, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Probably 100% of that has a bike lane or is adjacent to residential, so it wouldn't legally be allowed to park or camp there.
If you got a bike lane.
Oh,
Good.
But I think you should define it,
I agree.
make it very clear.
See, yeah, that's the problem. People are gonna move.
That's my only concern with it going to a vote in 2 weeks, is that I feel like it's not even drafted yet, you know? So is this something that we can communicate about between now and then in email, or is that off limits? Does it okay.
Council feels.
Yeah.
So clear, maybe a clarification of a definition in here that makes sure that it's not in any school area.
Or limit it to what you do want it in, not where you don't want it, but just say, it can be in the downtown commercial and it can be in industrial. Period.
And that's about all we have, because everything else is residential.
Everything else is
So
residential.
it can't be on their property, but it can be on roads owned by the public adjacent to this property.
Yeah.
And out here, there's not really any roads, are there?
Nope.
There's no roads out there. So it would basically be any of the streets in this area. Which would
And there
work.
are no there's not a lot of public streets in
There really isn't, yeah.
in the industrial area.
So,
It's along the edge.
where's like the 76 Montrose Pizza? Are those right here, or am I mistaken? West, no, that's West D. Okay, so they're up here. Okay, so they're up here. The business owners here may not be happy with that.
We're kind of, nobody's gonna be happy.
Nobody's-
Nobody's gonna be
yeah,
happy.
this isn't
So
gonna
we're-
please
we're right-
anyone.
We're right back to where we started.
Business
This
comes
is
first
it.
though? No.
Because everything else is residential.
And anywhere there's a residence here, they can't park adjacent to that, meaning out in front of the house or across the street from the house.
Here, and here, and here, can't park.
It just says residentially zoned private
Because this
property.
is.
That's not residentially zoned.
So they can
That's
park-
the downtown
So
commercial
they can park
area.
anywhere here, even right out in front of somebody's house.
I guess
Yeah.
on this side of the
Zoned
street,
downtown.
but not on the yellow side of the street. I guess if you wanted to get technical.
Well, like you say, there's lots of residences in here. It's 2 blocks either side.
I think we should try and define Cliff's idea. For sure, that needs to be added in, and just make it rotate.
That's a great idea.
It'll be a deterrent.
Be negative pain in a nice way.
Are we
Just keep
all
on
in
moving on.
agreement that we're gonna direct Ross to
Yes,
do that?
yes.
So what changes would we like to see in this document?
The tent campers would need to move every 72 hours.
772 or 24? mirroring Bend or
Yes.
I like
not?
24.
I like the way that Ben wrote theirs up, but.
Well, I like it too, but as Ross said, we
The
don't have
exception-
another site, we only have one site.
The League of Cities is using the 72-hour rule. Is there a reason
For what?
why? That you have to give them notice for 72 hours before they can be moved?
Oh, that's state stat, that's for camp clearing. There's a
Yeah.
statute that requires 72 hours written notice before you clear a camp.
Oh,
I
right.
think we would be arguing that we're not clearing a camp, we're moving a camp.
Well, and
So-
we're not clearing a camp at all. We're just asking them to
Well, we-
adhere to a rule.
We probably would be clearing them because they'll leave trash behind.
That's why I like Ben's other piece.
Well, the other thing is whole enforcement. If we get into 24 hours, then that gets even more difficult for our deputies.
Oh, I think 72 is reasonable. I just, yeah.
And on the weekends and holidays and things like that, Public Works is involved, so.
So I think that's one thing we'd like you to work into this, 72 hours, moving it 200 feet.
I think that's reasonable. We don't have enough space to make them move much farther than that. And that gives us some buffer to work and not be on top of us.
Okay.
And then we're thinking we want to be more specific about where street camping is permitted. And we're saying in the downtown business zone,
Downtown commercial.
downtown commercial zone only.
And industrial.
Do we want to include industrial in there or not?
You can, but I don't think there's much streets in there.
This is all balled up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the public road in there,
Mhm.
right there. And we've had issues before with people parking in the gravel strip alongside there.
And I haven't paid it, but the little street that we're about to give up,
Park?
is it, where does it go beyond the bridge?
It just goes to the bridge,
That's it, that's
Yeah.
all the street there is?
pretty much.
The right-of-way actually ends halfway across the bridge.
Oh, right, so there's nothing there, so, okay. Yeah, I don't think there's much
So,
for,
That's right here.
yeah.
But I can't imagine the business owners here would be happy with a string of RVs parked here in that gravel
No.
with a railroad track on one side and their
Well,
business.
nobody's,
Nobody's
yeah,
gonna be
yeah,
happy.
nobody's gonna be happy with,
If we put them in the industrial, this is gonna sound really like kind of rude, but I'm gonna say it. They can park there by the railroad track and listen to that noise and be inconvenienced. I would rather have them be parked there in that gravel mare than in front of the veterinarian's office right down here or in front of the library. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, this ordinance too, we need to create it, but ordinances can be undone too. If the council 6 months later said, wow,
The industrial area doesn't have walk-in traffic to those businesses like Pazos and the Wellness Center and the vet clinic and City Hall.
But it also doesn't have places to park.
Yeah, so darn it, there's only gonna be 2 places and they're already taken by John Doe and Jane Smith.
We have to provide more space then.
Yeah, we don't get to limit.
What about the parking lot right across here where I parked?
That's our designated area.
Like the same truck that's been there every council
Yeah.
meeting.
She parks there during the day and she leaves at night.
Are you saying that if Garden Park gets full of tent campers, we have to provide another place?
And
We can't move them out of the
And
city.
eventually I have to provide a bathroom.
I will give you, this is from a week ago, Mayor's Roundtable, Lane County. And now when mayors meet in Lane County, we always talk about homelessness. The
And
mayor from-
sewers.
The mayor from Cottage Grove said, and Cottage Grove has had a lot of hard deliberations about this, if you've been following the news, over the last year plus. Cottage Grove, huge. So they did create a location that was manned, meaning there's somebody there, and it filled up. But then they created a second location that was unmanned, and it filled up. And now they have prioritized all their city parks lowest to highest, and now they are beginning to tell, because they have overflowed here, they've overflowed here. So William, like you say, if St. Vincent fills up, they don't take any more people, but they do have to go someplace. And the city has to make space available. That's the Boise law. So Cottage Grove is prioritizing their parks. And these are now filled, so you can go here, and here, and here, and here, and here. And that's the current law. However, the laws are going to be severely challenged come July 1st.
Oh, I agree.
I think
Yeah.
it's going to be a moving target. Things are going to change. The council can undo or change an ordinance once it's adopted. In other words, it may not be perfect, and we're going to get feedback. Every community in Oregon is going to get feedback. Currently, what we have in Creswell is we have 6 to 8 people who call Creswell home. We're not really a transient population. We're people who call Creswell home. Some of them have been here for years. And currently it's in trucks, it's in RVs on our city streets. We don't have the tent camping yet. You don't have a crystal ball, as you said, Tammy. Where will we be in 5 and 10 years? None of us knows. All we do know is by July 1st or somewhere thereabouts, we have to have an ordinance. So I think we have to create the best we can for now, knowing it can be changed and the situation will change and laws will change. But we have to come up with something now. So I'm feeling like we need to ask Ross to massage this. And I'm feeling like it needs to come back to another work session in a month and then go on the council docket for the June vote. And then if it's not unanimous, it'll come back in July. And Ross has said he thinks we can, as long as we're in process, that we'll be okay. So that's my thinking. It's 9:40. We still have another topic to cover. So I need to hear from
I think
council
we have a good
members.
chance of it being unanimous the first time.
So I need to hear from council members.
I
Are
don't
you
think-
comfortable bringing it back in a month? So what would you rather do?
I don't think we're gonna come up with new opinions at another work session. I think it's fiscally irresponsible to pay Ross to come back and do this again. Even if the entire HOA community that Lori's part of came, they would say the same thing that she's told us.
We're asking him to
You know?
massage the work he already did, like put in some changes that
Yeah,
we're
I
asking
trust him.
for.
Bring it in May and I'll vote on it.
Could I
See,
just
I
ask?
have a problem with that.
No, not right yet.
I
not now.
don't need to have more discussion, just bring it in May, and if it's not right, we'll make a motion, we'll amend, we'll make it right. We are 7 capable adults.
Okay, so other counselors, what do you want to do time-wise?
So my thought is, what I would recommend doing is massaging it, coming back to the May work session for it to be on the June agenda. And the reason that I say that is I also believe that we are very capable of doing things. Given the events and given the next agenda item that we have, I would want to make sure that we're, sometimes speed slows us down. And so I'd want to make sure that we have an opportunity to have that we feel really confident about what's on the proposed
draft,
ordinance.
yeah.
Okay, Norma?
I'd like to see what we're going to be voting on, have a little more information. Too many changes. I mean, if there was just 1 or 2 changes, it might be easy just to bring it up to the next meeting and vote on it, but there's a lot of changes he's going to have
There's
to
only
come up
one
with.
change.
Yeah.
We're only changing one thing from what you see tonight.
I asked him to fix
three.
something else. There's actually
Okay.
3.
Can you give us those 3 things then, Ross?
Yeah, so I'm gonna massage the tent camping regulations to add in the 72-hour move, 200 feet provision.
Okay.
I'm going to change up the zoning provision in terms of where vehicle camping is allowed. I'm gonna change it from not residentially zoned to allow it in downtown commercial and industrial, question mark. I still did not hear whether industrial carried the day or not. And then third, I'm going to do some wordsmithing on just the overall presentation of the RV and vehicle camping prohibitions to make it read more cohesive and
Ben's is very nice.
Okay, so Alonzo,
I think that we need to, you do your massaging, and I think the appropriate time to take a look at that would be at the work session, not at the council meeting.
Yeah, I feel a little, I feel like we had something else put in front of us that we didn't get to see a draft on before it came to us, and that created a little bit of hiccup, and I'd rather see as close to the final version as possible before we take it to vote.
Nick?
I like what Ross did. I felt really good about what I read, and I felt like it really presented exactly what we talked at the last work session. I was definitely one that pushed this later than what I was pushing for, and I would like to move forward sooner than later. I don't think these are that bad. I think Ross can bang it out. I'd like to get something on the books sooner than later, and I'd like to do our responsibility to the state that is required. However, more importantly, our citizens who live here and pay the taxes, I want this to be difficult. If they're gonna come here, it's gonna be difficult for them to stay, and they gotta move on down the road. We don't have services, they need to get on down the road. I don't know where it is, God bless, good luck, but they're not my responsibility. I got plenty of other people under my umbrella that are responsible for, and they're not. And taxpayers pay for that park, period, and it is for us, for the taxpayers, and if we have to have something, then I believe they get in, get out. It is what it is. So I'm all for massaging that, putting these in there, and getting it voted on.
In May, in 2 weeks.
In May.
Okay. Stacy?
I'm open to either one. I don't like having things put in front of me the day I'm voting on it or a few days, but I suppose if it comes to us the Friday before, that would give us an opportunity to email any concerns, right? Can we do that? I mean, okay.
To Michelle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or to him directly, right? Like
No,
I can
probably
say,
to
I see it
Michelle, and
always
Michelle
to
would
Michelle, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm open to either or.
So my only thought would be, we have public members here who have definite feelings about this. If it came back in another month for another work session, we might have more members of the public come, who would give us more insight. That might help us to fine tune it a little bit more.
Maybe.
And while we've all known about this, and the news has been out quite a bit, there are many people who haven't got the news that July 1st, all municipalities in the state of Oregon must revise their camping ordinances. That's been in the news, but not everybody knows that. So I see some advantage in waiting a little bit. Tammy?
Respectfully disagree. We start putting on social media that we're gonna have this at the next work session, we start inviting the public, and guess what? Word gets out that Garden Park is gonna be open for anybody who wants to camp there. And I do not, in my heart, it's okay if people disagree with me, I do not believe that any more citizens will come and say anything different than these ladies. We do not want homeless camps, and Cresswell is going to be the majority of our constituents' stance. I 100% believe that. I want to vote on it in May, I want to quietly put this ordinance on the books, and I want to move on to other budgetary issues that are needing our attention. This is my opinion. Thank you for letting me speak.
I appreciate that, but I don't think that a city or any public official should be doing anything quietly so that the public can't see it. That's my stance on that.
Okay, we're gonna
Perhaps
allow
the
last
wrong
opportunity,
wording.
we're gonna allow a last opportunity from the public, because the council's gotta decide and go on. So, last shot.
Respectfully, I disagree with the councilwoman, but that's an added thing of what I really wanted to say, which was, I would like to see and suggest, since Ross is working on it anyway, could he look at part of Ben and everything else, and whether the 72 hours or whatever he comes up with, because he's the expert, be as restrictive as possible in whatever he comes up with to give you guys, so that you see the toughest case possible, and then you can meet as the 7 of you and pick out what you think might not quite sit well, or what may be a difference of opinion, but that way he has spent his time maybe more constructively to give you the tightest limitations and restrictions to help some of the public concerns and make it somewhat, even though it will never be, somewhat more palatable and make us feel a little bit safer, because it's gonna happen no matter what. But if it's more restrictive than less, and you can change things later and some things aren't working out, hopefully eliminating everyone coming here and just feeling like it's just a wide open. Because it's gonna be harsh no matter what, but for you guys to decide on if he incorporated some of the tougher things that we might not be able to pull off right now, only having one place, but at least the language is there. It's not having him go back and redoing it all the time and giving you guys, I think, a tighter policy to work with, to cover everyone's, and including the public.
Okay, so
We
now,
don't know
now
what's
we as the
tight.
council are
It's
gonna
not been
make our
tested.
decision. So, we're just gonna have to go around and give me a heads up. 2 weeks, have the resolution at the council meeting, vote on it then? Yes? Nod your head up and down.
Yes.
I'll say yes.
Bring it back to the work session and not vote until June, nod your heads up and down. Norma, you're in the middle.
I know I'm in the middle because I can see good points either way. I was leaning, I guess in the beginning I was leaning more to let's vote on it and not have another work session. So I guess I'll go that direction.
Okay. So, with that in mind, can you have something for us in 2 weeks?
Yes.
Okay,
In 1 week.
in 1 week.
Yes.
So it goes to Grace. Okay, so it will be on the agenda for the May council session. And at that time, we're going to get into a little training right now on how we can amend the motion, which is always a possibility, right?
You're right, Mayor.
Okay, so let's move on to our last subject for tonight, which is the tough ordinance vote and some training from Ross.
Well, I don't know how much training I need to provide. I think we all realize that at the last meeting, and as I understand it, I was not there, there was a motion to first reading or to adopt. The fee ordinance, and then it was a second, and during discussion, which follows the second motion, there was a motion to amend. And Michelle made a point of order suggesting that the motion to amend was not a proper motion at that time. I think we all realize people make mistakes, and Michelle made a mistake in that, and so that motion should have been allowed. A motion to amend is okay to make after a second. And then, so the motion to amend, if it had been seconded, would have been put to the full council to approve or not approve. And if it was turned down, then the first motion would have been back before you. So that's how the procedure should have gone. And so that motion to amend was not accepted. And so now we had, I believe, the motion to approve was approved, not unanimously, it was non-unanimous. So now you have a second reading at your next council meeting. And I guess we can't undo the mistake, and so it seems to me, my recommendation, and really, the rules are yours, the procedure is yours, so you get to decide how you want to handle it. I guess my recommendation would be to have a motion, the functional equivalent of the motion to amend, take place first at your next meeting, and then if that passes, then you have got a new course to take. If it doesn't pass, then you bring back, then you would do a second reading of the ordinance adoption. That's my recommendation on how to quote-unquote cure the mistake at the last meeting.
What exactly was the mistake? Because I feel like 2 mistakes happened.
Yeah.
So I'd like some clarification on what mistake you're talking about, just about me being stopped from making the motion to amend.
Correct, yeah.
So I believe that the second mistake is that the city manager should not be calling point of order.
Okay.
It's very
I-
clearly stated in our book, and it states very clearly that only in the event that we've given them that power. If you go to our city charter, we have not given them that power. So does that not make that public hearing illegal or null and void?
No, I think council action was council action, and I think there was, it could have been cured at that point. You were all here, you had a mayor presiding over the meeting, could have.
I tried to challenge it and I was stopped from challenging it. So I feel like I like your solution. I'm gonna leave it at that. I like your offer of the solution. But I think we need to establish whether or not we're doing things correctly going forward.
Michelle?
Thank you. I would like to apologize.
I
I made a mistake. It was an honest mistake. I had a moment, and I apologize. And I apologize to the entire council, because this is drawing this out, and I'm very sorry. But I do feel that I do have a role in helping you achieve an end result. There are many times during city council meetings, or even meetings of committees, where I'm like, you have to second that, you have to, point of order, you have to do this, you have to read it twice by title. If I didn't do that, if I didn't step up and do that, and I believe it's allowed by the charter, that's my personal
It's not in
opinion.
there, I looked.
So
It's not, it is. I believe the charter says I may participate in all discussions with the
Yeah.
city council.
In discussions, not in the vote, and it's,
I was not voting,
Or
and I
in
don't
the-
vote. Call to order.
only the person in the rule, Robert's rules, only the person in charge of the meeting, right, can call a point of order or decide on it. I can't remember, but
Can
the way
decide on
I'm
it.
reading it is that unless we specifically give that power to city employees, they don't have that power.
It's given to me in the charter,
Okay.
specifically.
I guess I missed where, so I just
Well,
need
let's
to be
find
directed
out
to
where.
that. Because if we're gonna do it, we need to do it right? And I do understand, you said you made a mistake. Mayor Stram told me over the phone that apparently this mistake has been being made for a long time. I don't know, if that's real or not. I don't know what to think about it. I feel like it was a very convenient mistake, and that's what bothers me. So that's why I feel like going forward, we need to establish what the rules are and follow them. So if it is called out in here, I apologize, I missed it.
Well, I seconded the mistake because I believe Michelle was accurate as well at the meeting. And
I knew she was, and I didn't have my book with me, so
Right.
I wasn't gonna extend the meeting by continuing to argue
Yeah.
after trying to appeal it the first time, which I did out of
Right.
courtesy, honestly.
Yep.
Yeah, I am
So,
aware of the
let me-
fact.
Let me finish. So I supported Michelle in the mistake, and so I was mistaken as well, council. So what I read in the charter is, under point of office is section 33F, the administrator may take part in all council discussions. The administrator doesn't ever vote.
Taking
So,
place
let
in
let
the
me,
discussion is different
let me
than.
finish. One of the other rules that we have in our governing rules is 5.2 states, "The city council agrees to be clear and simple in its procedures and considerations and avoid invoking the finer points of parliamentary rules to obscure issues and arouse audience suspicion." Now, so my take on that is that we have always welcomed our city manager, whether it was Michelle or previous city managers, to participate with us, but never vote. We've never had a city manager vote, but they participate with us. We've had council members call point of order before. in meetings.
That's
A
legal.
council member can call a point of order.
Mm-hmm.
We have made a mistake in the past, because I've made it, where there was a proposed amendment to the motion, and we said that the one who made the motion had to agree to the amendment, and the one who seconded the motion had to agree to withdraw the second. And I think those are all in error, am I correct?
Yes.
Right, yeah, those are wrong as
But
well.
we have done that in the past, in error. So
doesn't mean
it
we
was,
should
it was,
keep
it was
doing
it was an honest mistake that Michelle and I both made, and I apologize as well for that. It was a mistake predicated upon previous mistakes. And now I stand corrected. So, you know, I like what Ross is suggesting, that when we have the meeting in 2 weeks, and we come to the agenda item, that I would begin by saying, this agenda item is before us, and we begin by, is there a motion on the floor to amend the motion that was previously made? So then we'll have to have Grace state what the motion was from the previous meeting. Then, is there a motion on the floor to amend this motion? And then at that point, any counselor can raise their hand to voice a motion to amend the motion.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think you can do a motion to amend before you actually call the motion to the table. So I think you actually have to call the motion, have
have
it
it read.
seconded, and then open
Yes.
up the floor for discussion, in which time somebody could make a motion to amend. I don't think you can come into the public meeting ahead of time
Yeah.
with an amended motion.
Well,
And you
no,
can't
what I'm
say,
saying,
do
the-
we have them, you can't ask that question
Yeah.
because,
It
no,
defeats
we,
the
it was
purpose.
shut down. And
Yeah.
unintentionally, I believe
but
it
the
was
motion
an
was
intentional
made,
mistake.
seconded, and passed,
100%.
so we're there for a second reading of the motion. So how do we do that?
Well, no, I think what you're doing is we can talk about your ordinance adoption process a little bit too, because I'm not sure you actually, I don't think you have two motions to adopt. But again, I think that's a separate issue. My suggestion would be to allow the counselor to make a motion before you call for a motion to adopt. And so we have a clean slate where the council can consider her proposal, which would be structured I'm not exactly sure what your proposal is.
Words.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, you can make your proposal that the council adopt the ordinance with these changes, and you could spell that out. You can maybe even come prepared with a written motion so people can see it.
I did last time, yeah.
Excellent. And then, so you would consider, my proposal is to have you all consider that first. If it passes, then you've got your direction, and you
So
don't.
it's a new motion, so we wouldn't,
Right.
so we're not required to vote on the motion that was made.
I think a mistake was made, and that is now in the past. And since we actually have a process where you are considering adoption at 2 meetings, I think we can cure that mistake by allowing this motion first before you consider the second reading.
So then that brings up another question, because the book talks about, there's a statement in the book that says amendments cannot negate the original motion. And Stacy, what I heard you say at the meeting was that you would like to amend the motion to allow the public to vote on it.
Define negate. Negate would
Yeah,
mean like,
negate means-
it would mean like, it would turn the original motion from having to be a yes vote to a no vote, right? So no, that was not going to happen.
Well, but the motion was for the council to adopt it. So if the amendment is to put this to a vote of the people, then that negates, in my mind, the motion of the council
Still a
adopting.
yes vote in the end though. It still requires a yes to pass. I'm not negating anything.
Right. So a referral from the council is the adoption of an ordinance that is referred to the public. It's still the council adoption of the ordinance. It's putting off the effectiveness of the ordinance until a vote. So if it's passed at an election, then it becomes effective. You all are still putting a vote for adoption forward. And so, as I understand, the motion, the amendment that was made was to, instead of have it effective in 30 days after adoption, be effective after putting it to a vote. And so I believe that is an amendment of the motion. It's not a negation.
And we
I
didn't
would-
get far enough for us to totally hear what you had in mind either.
I know.
Yeah, I cut you off.
I know, it's all right. Both of you, I mean, like, I'm over it. Like, I was, kind of taken aback in the moment because I didn't have I tried to fight it and I realized I wasn't gonna get anywhere. And I should have just stood my ground. And I learned my lesson that night too. And the other lesson I learned is that this is now my Bible and it's going everywhere with me.
Well, and I commend you for your tenacity. I sit next to you and I saw that you were very prepared. And Counselor Holt had done a lot of research to learn how to make an amendment. So it's unfortunate that, we're not, it's not robots running this, right? It's just a human error and we're gonna all move forward. And I am thankful that we're all being adults about it. And I don't think it was an intentional mistake. So we can handle this at our we've been kicking this down the road for 1.5 years. We can vote on this ordinance finally in 2 weeks, is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Well, you can vote
Amended ordinance.
on her motion.
Page 60 is the page that it has the language in it that I believe makes it not okay for the last paragraph. Well, it's the last paragraph. Basically,
The quote by Anne?
huh?
Or this is the
On page
final one
60?
about the clerk serves as parliamentarian? Oh, that's 61.
Are you on page 60?
Yeah.
It says, Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, give members the right to make this motion, but we believe that it's also good for a council when staff are empowered to raise points of order.
Right. They have to be empowered though, and it talks about this in here. It talks about how by general rule, nobody but us should be making points of order or motions or anything like that.
Except
And
that our charter says,
where at?
our city charter,
Says I may participate.
this is not the governing rules, the city charter, page 5,
Yeah.
under appointed officers, under the duties of the city manager. The administrator may take part in all council discussions.
Taking part in a discussion is one thing, but actually calling for an order in a public hearing is a completely other thing, in my opinion. It's totally fine, and she's very helpful, and I have no problem with that. I just want to make sure we're following the rules, because if we're going to, I'm a big believer, if we're going to follow the rules, we either follow them or we don't. There's no gray area,
She has a lot with her points to make us think about things. We can choose not to listen to her, I guess.
You can
But-
choose not to listen to me.
But to
she
start
has
the process
a
of
lot
a
of
meeting.
wisdom that she brings to the table.
I understand that. I 100% appreciate that. I'm just saying that I just want, it occurs to me that it would be very easy for a city employee to conveniently or inconveniently or whatever, stop the process of a meeting by making mistakes, if we allowed that all the time, right? And so I think we have to define, it's just something I wanted to bring up. I think that there's a disconnect between what's in here and what's in here. I don't read it that way.
Michelle?
Thank you. The charter is over everything. So if you choose this book and it disagrees with the charter takes precedence.
Yeah.
Um,
The mention of this book is in the governing rules set by the council, not the charter.
And the charter.
So Ross, I'm wondering if you have an opinion for us?
So I do have an interpretation of this
Okay.
provision. And it comes with a little bit of history, just because I've been at this job for a while, and I know the formulation of this charter and where it comes from and how that has changed over time. And so the model charter of this provision, from where this comes from, says the city manager is a de facto member of the council, but does not vote. And so this is a modernization, I believe, of that provision. And so I believe that the interpretation should be the same. In other words, that the council sits at the dais and gets to participate in the decisions, but does not vote. And I would think that includes guiding, as the professional, guiding the council through the process, the deliberate process, pointing out procedure, pointing out process, helping you all through it. But at the end of the day, these are your rules.
Yeah.
I think you can't take away the right of the city manager to participate.
I'm not looking to.
No, I know, I'm just
Okay.
offering, I'm not trying to put words in your
Just
mouth.
wanna make sure we're doing things right.
Yeah. So it's my opinion that Michelle had the authority to call the point of
Okay.
order. Based upon not only this wording, but just where this wording comes from and how it's operated across the state in the League of Oregon Cities Model Charter. I think that aids this body, who is made up of volunteers, and some of you are new and some of you aren't, and sometimes the rules come quickly and sometimes they don't, and that's why you hire a professional to help you, to guide you. But at the end of the day, when a point of order is called, it's then yours to control. And so, the mayor gets to control, okay, how do we respond to that? And how do we as a body then take the next step? And so she gets to call the question, it is not call the question, call the point of order. Sorry, confusing words choice. Call the point of order, but then that just brings it to you all as a body to decide how to handle it. Because she doesn't get a vote on the point of order. She gets to just say, hey, I think you did something wrong, or I think you should have been doing this, and then you all get to say, well, thanks for that, but we're going to do it this way. Or, oh, you're right, we're going to follow that advice. So that's how I think it plays out.
Except that when I tried to appeal it, she jumped in and said, no, you can't do that. So it never really was in your lap. I mean, kind of, you agreed with her, but you never took that charge. So,
I agreed with Michelle's interpretation,
yeah,
and so the two of us agreed.
yeah.
Stacy, you challenged it, but the rest of the council didn't particularly challenge it, so we went on.
Yeah, what happened was I called a point of order, and then I explained what the point of order was, which cut off Counselor Holt completely. And then you and I talked, but it was never I'm sorry. I'm just sorry.
I think that it's okay, and I think that his solution he's proposing is probably the fairest way to go forward. I don't want to delay, kick it down the road again. I don't want to delay the inevitable. But I think that in fairness, it should be allowed, and so I think that it's reasonable as long as everybody else agrees.
Well, the ordinance will be there again, as before, so that when we come to that item, I basically just say I'm entertaining a motion, as I always do. And then the floor is open. So to walk through a little bit of the process, let me see if I can state it correctly, then you chime in. A motion is made, according to the rules, it's not debated until there's a second. Then once there's a second, then I open up the floor for council discussion, debate, things like that. Then someone can make an amendment, can move to amend, and they can move to amend any way they want to.
Well, I guess we talked about whether, as long as it doesn't negate, so the motion to amend can't be, I move to amend to not adopt the ordinance.
Right.
When the motion was to adopt the ordinance.
And the council is the ones who has to decide if the amendment negates or does not negate. We're not going to call you on the phone.
Right, no, and I think that's the way it should be, and I think it should be done out in the open, and I think that's the fair way. You all control these rules. There's just procedures, there's an order for things, there's got to be a motion in a second, and then we discuss. And if there's a question on procedure, you all can get together and decide, I think that's the right way to do it, or I think this is the right way to do it, and you can vote on that, on this is how I think we should solve this question in front of this body. What I'm proposing is that you allow a motion, and if there's a second, then there would be deliberation on that motion, and then an eventual vote on that motion. And if that motion passes, then we have a new direction on that ordinance. If it doesn't pass, then you ask for another motion.
So if Stacy makes a different motion, then that would be a new motion, and if it doesn't pass by unanimous vote, then it goes to the second vote.
No.
No.
Mm-hmm.
If
I mean,
it
it's the
doesn't
same-
pass
If it
by a
doesn't pass.
majority,
Even though it's the same ordinance, but it's a different motion.
because it's a second, it's,
That's why I'm saying, if we do this properly, I think we have to actually call the motion and then do an amend in debate. And I'd also like to point out that it's not just amending motions that you can do in that debate session. You can motion to table, you can motion to, there's other things too. So I think we all need to learn our Robert's rules. I work within Robert's rules. I've been doing this a couple of years, so I attend meetings where this goes on, and so I have a pretty good understanding of them. But I don't. I'm not a lawyer, so when it comes down to that piece that I was saying, I really feel like we have to actually bring it to the table first if we're going to try to amend it. But you're saying to call out a fresh motion.
Brandon? Yeah, because.
Yeah,
that
but then that
one's
brings
on
in, but it's based on an ordinance, right? And so, does it have to be part of that process?
Well, part of that,
Does it have to be part, well,
does it have to be read twice by title?
yeah, thank you, yeah.
And does there need to be a new public hearing?
Yeah, exactly, that's why I think that we might be shooting ourselves
We
in
had
the
a
foot
public
by trying to
hearing
do
on
it
the
this
ordinance
way.
already.
But that
Right.
motion to pass that motion that you made, Mayor, because nobody else stepped up, you made the motion. We voted against it.
No,
Instead-
the motion passed.
The motion passed.
The motion passed, but it wasn't
Unanimous.
Unanimous,
Right.
Anonymous. We wish it was anonymous.
So it
Make the top go away.
So it moves on to a second reading.
Second reading. Oh, yeah, I'm going to agree with Counselor
A
Holt.
second
I
reading
think
of
we
the
have to
ordinance.
start out the meeting with the second reading.
It is the second
We
reading.
can't get
Yeah.
ahead of it, because then it's
Okay.
not part of the public hearing with the second reading.
well, there's no public hearing. So the,
Okay, no public hearing for the second time around.
We do a
Got
second
that.
reading, and then you entertain a motion. Counselor Holt makes her motion.
I'm fine if you go to that. So
That's what-
I need a recommendation. It's for you to decide how to proceed.
I think we need to know what's legal.
State your recommendation again.
Well,
Well, I think they're both legal.
Okay.
I think one is a little bit, I don't know.
because we get to decide.
Because it's my idea, I think it's a little bit cleaner.
Which is?
But I'm not opposed to calling a motion for second reading and then allowing you then to
So you're
amend
saying
that.
that we could come in and he could say, do I have anyone that wants to make a motion? And instead of reading that motion that's written and expected, I would come in and say, I would like to motion to amend that, what's written.
No, you would make your motion.
Yeah, you don't have to say the
You
word
don't have to
amend.
amend it.
Oh, yeah, well,
Yeah. No, you just say, I'm making a motion, blah, blah.
I make a motion to amend the ordinance to put it to a vote of the voters.
so you are amending it.
The
No.
ordinance.
You're
That's the
amending the
ordinance.
ordinance,
Oh,
but
the
not the
ordinance,
motion.
the ordinance.
Yeah,
I see
not
what you're
the
saying.
motion.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. All right.
Yeah. That's a clean slate, like Ross.
Okay, fair. I agree.
I'm talking too much.
But
I'm sorry.
we're dealing with
Don't
this.
be confused.
Okay. No, stop. Thank you.
To amend the
Totally
ordinance, so the ordinance, so if that passed and it was put to a vote of the people, then the ordinance goes to a vote. That
The
ordinance,
amended.
No,
ordinance.
all I would be doing,
The ordinance will have to be amended to take it to a public vote.
because the ordinance is drafted to where it's adopted by the council,
Right.
to amend the ordinance.
which is why I tried to motion to amend the, the motion.
It would still require the ordinance to be amended.
Because as it's written, it's just adopted by council.
That's right. If it goes to a vote, we have to amend the ordinance.
Right, and I think we can come prepared for that. I mean, I think we can prepare another draft of the ordinance that takes off, I mean, I guess I don't have it in front of me, but there should be a final section that says this ordinance is adopted by the council and effective in 30 days. We would change that
You would change that, I get to
provision to be,
Mhm.
this ordinance is adopted by the council and shall be presented to the voters at the next general election. That's your, what I'm proposing is that's your motion. Your motion is to amend the ordinance, to have it.
That was my intent that night, yes.
I think, and we can certainly come prepared with a version of the ordinance that is like that. And so, well, we can have 2 copies of the ordinance before you, and you get first up. And if that passes, then it's going to the vote.
But this constitutes the second reading,
Right,
and so
Because we've already done
it
it.
passes by simple majority.
right.
Whatever motion is made and is seconded can pass by simple majority
Right.
and then be adopted.
Right,
And then it's,
and I don't know if you want to know, the reason I think that's legal is because I don't believe you actually need a motion for a reading. I think a reading just happens. So you call, so at the first meeting, you actually don't ask for a motion. You call for a reading of the ordinance by title only.
Mhm.
And generally, the city recorder reads the motion, the ordinance by title. And then you say, is there any objection to read the title of the ordinance by title only for a second time? And if there's an objection, you say, okay, we're going to the next meeting, because it's not unanimous.
say that again, an objection to reading it twice, because we say you have to read it twice by title. So you make a motion, you read it twice by title, then somebody makes a second.
I've always thought that was rather not in line with our charter.
Same
That's
here.
a custom that this city has followed since before I was here. But what Ross is explaining follows the charter much better.
Yeah, we don't do it like he just said.
Yeah, we don't, we do it as as it's been passed
That was how I
down.
was told it was
Past
done.
practice.
Right,
Yeah.
so I'm thinking maybe we do it a new way that's more in line with our charter.
Well, the charters, the rule book.
Should be doing it the way that we
And
say
we
we're
can,
supposed to do
we
it.
can update the script that we give you to make it more in
Good.
line with the charter, because the charter, it's a little convoluted.
Ordinance adoption. Before final passage to be read fully and distinctly on 2 different days.
But you can waive that. If you
Yeah,
keep
by
going.
unanimous vote.
Yeah,
That was why I did that whole.
Upon being first read in full and then by title.
It can be enacted at a single meeting.
Which I will be bringing back.
Oh,
By title, only if no council member requests to have it read in full, or copy is presented.
so it's not up to me, I'm not a counselor, but I think what Ross is suggesting is much more in line with our charter and is appropriate to have the clerk read it by title.
So when we come to an ordinance, the clerk reads it once by title. Then what?
Then generally, I would say, do we have any objections to read it for a second time? And if there is an objection, then we know it's not unanimous, and we don't have a second reading. And so the second reading is now presented at the next meeting,
So there's no motion or anything?
not until adoption. So you read it twice, and then there's one motion to adopt. And that's the adoption process.
I'm confused about
Michelle.
the piece about, you said that the first reading, they would call and ask what? Or they would say what after that? They would ask if there's an objection to reading it the second time?
Right. Because if there's an objection, now you know it's not unanimous. If there is no objection, then you can have a vote to,
In most cities, adopting an ordinance is a two-step process. This short circuits it. In most cities, you read you read it once and have the vote, then you read it at the second meeting and have a vote.
Oh, that makes way more sense.
This instead gets rid of that second meeting if no one objects to it. So you can read it, so you're compressing the timeline. And that's what this charter allows.
So you're saying that if we,
Object after the first reading.
then it would go to a meeting 30 days later, but we couldn't, could you just end up having it be kicked down the road constantly
No.
under that circumstance?
No, because it only requires 2 readings.
Oh, okay,
The reading is to let the public know and give them time to respond.
okay.
But if you think that the ordinance is of a, merit that the public's not going to care, then this allows you to shorten that process by overlapping the 2 readings.
Okay, that makes sense.
it also allows someone to vote in favor of a second reading, but vote against the ordinance,
Oh, yeah.
which is something I don't think your current process allows, which I think it should.
Oh, we aren't allowed to do that? Because that should be,
That's how it gets voted in.
Vote
Yeah.
in favor of the second reading.
That's how they tell us.
So then it is a second reading, which could be passed at that meeting if it was unanimous. And then you debate it, and then somebody can vote against it.
Right, yeah, so you have, if there's no objection, then you have a motion for a second reading, and then that's unanimous.
Mhm.
So there's a second reading, and now you ask for a motion for adoption. And then there's a second, and then there's a debate, and that vote can be 4-3. So you can vote in favor of getting this done in one night, but still vote against it because you don't like the proposal.
But it would pass at that one night, 4-3?
Yeah.
Because we've never done it that way. We've said it has to be unanimous.
you're saying that,
No, it was unanimous. The second reading was unanimous.
That it should be read twice.
Right, which is what the charter
Right.
says.
I think the confusion is coming from, there's actually a separation between reading the ordinance and making a motion. They kind of got combined here.
Yeah.
So that when you read the reading is actually the motion, and it doesn't have to be that way. So, yeah, but that's the custom here in Cresswell.
so perhaps we need to revisit our own rules.
I don't think what you've been doing is unlawful. I mean,
No.
you're reading it twice, and you're adopting it by motion. So I think everything, all the ordinances you've passed have been lawful and legal. It's just, I think there's a different way to do it that might match the charter a little bit better, and then also give folks the opportunity to say, I don't want to keep talking about this, so I want to let everyone vote on this at one meeting, but I'm not going to vote for it.
But you said our charter prevents us from doing that approach, isn't that what you said?
No.
Or did I confuse that with a different part?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not, I'm meshing everything together. Okay, that makes sense. So-
Because I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
because we have something coming up at our next meeting that's going to be confusing as is, I don't think that it would be a good time to,
I agree
let's
with you.
change and just, we're just going to change everything up on top of trying to correct something that we already messed up.
I was just gonna say
I don't
the
think
same
we should
thing.
do that. If we're going to take a look at redoing this a new way, which is a great idea, I think maybe we should slow it down a little and do it at a better time. I don't think it would be a good time to do that.
I agree.
And I think my proposal basically proposed keeping your basic format where you have 2 votes. We've already had the first reading, and so the second reading is next meeting, where you can have a proposal to amend the ordinance to provide for voter approval. That can go to a second and a vote, and if it, then you've had two readings on the ordinance. The ordinance title doesn't change. This is the ordinance language is still the same. All we're doing is putting it to the vote, so I don't believe that's a material change. I think you can adopt it after the second reading. And if that passes, then we're done. And if it doesn't pass, then there's another motion to adopt the ordinance as previously provided with an effective date of 30
And nothing
days.
will get delayed as a result of any of this, which I think is the biggest concern.
I
so,
don't believe so.
Yeah, okay.
Because you've had your 2 readings and yeah.
Stacy,
So just.
Stacy, Shelley.
Sorry. That's okay. No, so quick question actually about going back to the camping stuff that we were talking about. So what we had talked about earlier was that essentially like if it's not passed unanimously at the May work session, then we can amend and then we bring it forward again in June. So is that not accurate at this point, or could we take care of both of them, both votes in May?
Well, you always could have. So under my ordinance adoption procedure proposal, for the camping, we would have a first reading in May. We would have the mayor ask for a second reading, and if everyone agrees, then you could have the second reading, and then you could have the vote all in May. If people want. And there's many reasons why you don't approve a second reading. It can be, I've got some people coming into town and I know they want to speak on this, and so I want to delay it for another month because I want more citizen input. That's one justification for voting no on unanimous reading. It's not just because you may actually, so you can vote no on unanimous reading, but still vote for the ordinance. It goes both ways. They're 2 separate processes, or 2 separate issues in the same process.
Okay, so.
Did we talk ethics today? I forget.
Sounds like we want Ross to, Michelle, are you the one who prepares our ordinances?
Well, it depends on the ordinance.
This particular ordinance on the
Which
tough.
one? The
On the
camping or the
tough, on the
tough? The tough ordinance is already prepared. We can just do an amended.
So we'd have 2 ordinances
Yeah.
before us.
I can give you 2 ordinances, or I can give you the amended language, which can be inserted into the ordinance.
So the same ordinance and amended language that can be inserted into it.
Just have it on standby. I doubt you'll need it. But you never know.
So that's what we'd like Michelle to do, right?
Yes.
And
Right.
if you'd like to give me language that you'd like to see in the amendment, I'd really like that.
I don't really. I think you'll do a fine job figuring
Okay.
that out. I just feel like you're doing a lot of work probably for nothing, but I'm still gonna take the opportunity to make the motion, so.
I understand that, and I respect that.
And that's not an unreasonable request. I think
No,
that's.
I don't think
we're-
so either.
Staff is here to serve the whole council.
Constituents that you're
Yeah.
representing and.
Yeah.
So then we still have to decide on Santa Fe.
Right, when
Resolution.
Santa Pac.
Are we bringing that resolution from Santa Pac at the May in 2 weeks? So then we will have 1 resolution and 2 ordinances in May. We'd have the camping ordinance and the tough ordinance and the Santa Pac resolution. Or did we want to put the Santa Pac resolution back to June?
I can put it back.
You wanna put Santa Fe back to June? Oh, June's gonna suck.
Every meeting we've had has been 4, 5, or 6
I know.
hours. I mean, we, I don't know what else to do.
They start getting shorter after June.
Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. I got babies that need to be fed.
What?
He's on the Public Safety Committee, and that's when we start up.
Yeah,
So let's quickly try to decide this so we can all go home, right?
yes.
Santa Pac resolution, raising the rate or whatever we want to vote on.
I mean, I'd like to personally would like to discuss that rate and maybe talking about, like you had said, maybe $5, earlier. I'd like to discuss the option of not going with the suggested rate and coming up with something more reasonable to, we're hammering our people this year, hammering. And they're not gonna stop servicing us if we negotiate that rate down. So, I don't know, I'd like some discussion on that personally, that's where I'm at.
Okay.
I would,
Alonzo?
I would agree with what Stacy just said.
So move it to the June meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
Put it on the agenda for May work session.
I think the citizens of Crestwell deserve at least some sort of trying to cut that down, because we have a lot that we're asking the citizens of Crestwell, and I strongly support that tough, but what are we looking at now? An increase of are we getting up to $15 a month? Between public safety, water, sewer, Sanipac, the tough.
And aren't we adding a stormwater drain?
Yeah, and that's
too?
coming too.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I'm combining everything, and I'm just guessing, it's gonna be $12-15 person. It's
Sanipac
a
won't
big
be a
ask,
utility fee,
but it will be.
but for people who outboard.
Yes.
So, Sanipac, May or June?
I am comfortable with June.
I'm comfortable with June too.
Seems like June. Okay, so
Just wants to be
I'm
done.
too tired.
we will put Sanipac on the work session. Make the note, Council President. That we'll put that Sanipac on the work session for May, and the resolution will come before us in June. And the camping ordinance will be in 2 weeks, and we'll have Michelle draft language for a possible for an amended motion on the TUF.
I think July 1st, I'm gonna go into hiding. All these fee increases, all of the new laws.
Okay.
Just gonna crawl under a rock.
Let's see, before we adjourn here, so just to let you know, Saturday's Coffee with the Cop at 10, and 11 o'clock Arbor Day in the park.
This Saturday, huh?
And budget training tomorrow night if you're new to the budget.
Budget training.
And with that, we're adjourned.
I won't be there. I have another obligation.
I've already got the training.
Right, but I was last year, she wrote me different.
Do I need to say anything about being at the budget meeting, or am I supposed to talk to the budget committee?
Yeah.
Okay, I talked to them about it.
Yeah.
Okay. He sent me the materials.
Yeah.
So I did the ones over.
You're good.
From this meeting and ordinance committee, moving forward, we all know what the motion is.
I know, I'm gonna hold you and hold you and hold you. No, I can't do that.
If we're gonna do something, we're gonna
He
have.
said it stopped at.
Look over more.
Any motion is made. Then we don't have to deal with amendments.
Yeah, I just want to, look everything on, look at it.
But didn't you do that after it was already raised? No, when did you do that? Where did you take that? Where did you take that? No, because you have to. I was never given an opportunity to speak. You're the president, you get to speak.
No. When we start talking about.
In the discussion period, which is after it's read. So what you're saying is instead of waiting for David, when he was calling for motions, I should have raised my hand and then made that motion instead of the scripted motion. Now I'm tracking, now. Fair.
All that complicated.
Fair. Yeah, fair. It's not the proper way that I.
Where's the handle? There is no handle on this one. Oh, it's way down there. All right, there you go. Thank you.
Take care of them.
Or we didn't want to.
I didn't realize that we were doing this. Oh, and
Oh,
it's
you're
too
gonna
late.
get
Ah, we
I
got
come
it.
in just in time to be done.
But she usually,
Thank you. Yeah.
usually needs one for that.
Gotcha.
All right, thank you, good night.
All right, thank you.
I think I just have that needs to go down, but she has, Shelley has. I can take it.
Okay, well, it looks like I need some retraining on how to do ordinances.
We
have
need to
done-
give you a better script.
We have done it that way ever since I've been here.
Yeah,
We read-
that's how.
Whoever made the motion had to read it twice.
You got all your stuff. Roberta. You do it that way.
And that's how they all do it. So you have to read it twice by title, and it has to be seconded.
No, you read it once by title, and then you ask
In the
if,
old method, the old method. I make a motion, I have to read it twice by title. Somebody needs a second, you have to read it second. And you amend it and let.
think so. I think we got it.
that's the old way. And that made the title